a no-sleep story posted by Jgrupe, How to Rob a Casino and Start the Zombie Apocalypse. When Mikey first came to me and told me what he wanted to do, I thought he'd lost his mind. Nobody robs a casino in real life, not unless they want to go to prison. Even in the movies people don't get away with it. But the more he talked about it, showing me his blueprints and plans, the more I realized he had been thinking about this for a long, long time. And his idea was ingenious. If executed correctly, there would be a very good chance at safety and a clean getaway. He had a man on the inside who had revealed to him the weaknesses in the casino's security systems. Still, I imagined there were plenty of factors he hadn't accounted for. That's why I came to you, he said when I pointed that out. You're the engineer in the family. How would you like to retire at 40, Brian? We'd be so rich, you'd never have to work another day in your life at that soul-crushing job you're always complaining about. Not only that, but this is our chance to make history. That part got me. Don't ask me why. The whole thing felt like a challenge to my analytical mind, which I couldn't deny. The feat of surpassing a casino's security system would be talked about for decades, perhaps even centuries. Books would be written about it, movies would be made, and podcasts would explore the theories on how it was accomplished. All right, I'm in, I finally told him after several days' consideration. But if things start to go sideways, promise me you'll put a stop to this. I don't want to see either one of us in prison. He just smiled, saying that wasn't going to happen. And he was right. What ended up happening was much worse. While Mikey worked to assemble a team, I set about doing my end of things. There were so many unknowns, right from the start. But the gears were turning in my head, and I was already starting to think of solutions to our problems. As an engineer, that's what I do. And I'm damn good at it. Measurements needed to be taken, first of all, to get even the most basic layout and understanding of where we were going to be excavating. Otherwise, we might drill up through the floor of the security office, instead of the casino vault. The problem was, you couldn't just go into the casino with a tape measure and start taking notes. I had to get creative. One morning, after making a series of initial measurements, I painted a white line on my bicycle tire, then rode around the outside of the casino counting the revolutions of my wheel. By the end of the day, using these measurements and the information from Mikey's man on the inside, we had our exact coordinates for the vault. Pretty clever, right? The next step was establishing a base camp and a drilling location. Mikey helped me scout nearby buildings that were for rent or lease, and we found one which was ideal, in an old warehouse a few blocks away from the casino. Using a dummy corporation Mikey had set up, we rented the place and began to dig. Little by little, I made my way into the nearby sewer system. From there, we'd make another hole which would lead into the vault. The sewers would act as our escape route, allowing us to evade the police and pop up a few blocks away right beside the getaway vehicle. One morning, Mikey told me he had finished assembling the crew. We got together at the rented building to discuss our plans and go over the operation. There was Dave, the street racer. He had a reputation for fast driving, quick instincts, and a long resume as a getaway man. He could drift with the best of them, and routinely won pink slips in late-night street races, acquiring cars which he then sold to upgrade his own ride. Our lockman was none other than Slim Fingers Pete, a notorious locksmith and safecracker. After learning to pick locks from his father growing up, Pete owned his own locksmith and vault building business for 30 years. Eventually, though, he got tired of the low wages and rude customers, and took up a life of crime. He began making a name for himself as a modern-day Robin Hood, stealing jewels, cash, and priceless artifacts from the various rich neighborhoods around town. But he dressed shabbily, and the rumor was he donated the stolen cash to charity. Who knew if that was really true, though? Lastly, we had our demolitions expert, C4 Cindy, as she was known around town, or as she preferred to be addressed, Cinders. After 2 tours of duty serving in the Special Forces, Cinders was tossed out for insubordination, given a dishonorable discharge, and sent packing from the military. This resulted in a lifelong vendetta from that day forward with every authority figure, especially if they were US military. Still, she mostly wore camouflage and had a bright pink buzz cut. Every crew needed a comedian to ease the tension, and Cinders took on that role from day one. Although she needed reminding sometimes to keep things serious when it mattered. The five of us sat around a table in front of a large chalkboard as Mikey began to lay out the plan. We were in our rented warehouse a few blocks from the casino, on the main level away from the sewer smell which had taken over the basement. All thanks to my drilling. The stink was getting worse, spreading to the main level now. I got a few glares from the other team members who knew what I was up to down there. Still, it was all a necessary part of the plan. All right, eyes up front everybody. I know the smell is a distraction, but I'm going over the operation with you all together for the first time, so just listen and save your questions for the end. Yes, teacher. If we listen well, can we have outdoors time after this? Cinders asked sarcastically, leaning forward and putting her chin in her hands like a precocious child. Cinders, if you want to get to blow something up, you better start taking this seriously. I am. She pouted. But then, after seeing his dead-set expression, she relaxed her posture, leaned back, and spoke in her grown-up voice. Okay, fine. I'm listening. Mikey took a deep breath and steeled himself for the grand unveiling. I was the only one in the room who knew all the details, since he'd practiced this presentation with me the night before. Right. Now, this plan is a bit complex, so bear with me. Dave, your job is gonna be the simplest. Monday at 0400 hours, you're going to be parked on the east side of Park Street, 6 blocks from the casino. Whatever vehicle you boost needs to be big enough to seat all 5 of us, plus we're gonna need cargo space and room for the cash. So I'm thinking of something like a work van. Preferably discreet, white in color with no markings. Great, so you want me to steal a boring, slow piece of shit, he muttered, grinning. Yeah, no problem. Boring and slow means the cops aren't gonna notice it. So that's perfect, Dave. We all waited for him to continue, and he looked at the chalkboard and started to write things out and draw diagrams, expanding on the execution of the plan. Pete, Cinders, and I will be down in the sewers. Brian will be up on street level with a police scanner, keeping an eye on the front of the casino, and keeping in touch with our man on the inside. All of this will guarantee that if someone finds out what we're doing, we'll get plenty of notice so we can escape. Everyone glared at me, hearing that I would be safely up on street level while they were down in the sewers getting their hands dirty. Brian has been the one in the sewer, drilling and doing all the hard, dangerous work up until now. So that's part of the reason he gets to be on lookout duty, which comes with its own risks, as well. Anybody got a problem with that? Mikey, the undisputed leader of the group, looked around at the others, sensing the shift in the room. It would have been easy to read into it as nepotism, but the 3 of them softened a few seconds later and Cinders smiled, laughing out loud. Hell, no wonder you stink so bad, Brian. I feel sorry for you, having to deal with Dave's nasty shits down in the sewers. That eased the tension and everybody laughed, since Dave had disappeared to the bathroom for 15 minutes earlier on, and we'd all been joking he was taking a dump. His face turned red but he chuckled too, as Mikey continued. Okay, settle down. Let's get through this. Then we can make fun of Dave more afterwards, and you can tell me your concerns. You got it, boss, Cinders said, doing a sarcastic military salute. Here's the part you're gonna like, Cinders. You're gonna blow a big asshole in the bottom of the vault. Then we're gonna use a rope ladder devised by Brian to climb in. I stood up to show them the prototype I'd designed, holding the nondescript cylinder in my hands. One person will hold the remote, while the other throws this up into the hole. Once it's inside the vault, the person with the remote will hit the button to engage the stabilizer bar, demonstrating how it worked. I hit a red button on the remote control and the thing expanded instantly like a 2-ended lightsaber made of steel. It's kinda heavy, so just watch out that it doesn't fall on you. It might take a few attempts to throw it up through the hole, but it's doable. Whoever wants to be the one making the throw will have plenty of time to practice. My hands are sure as they come, said Pete. I'll toss it up through the gap on the first go. Practice or no practice. Let's go with a bit of practice, just to be safe, Mikey said, continuing with the plan. Once we're all up in the vault, we'll only have a few minutes. Pete, you'll go up first and get started on the lockboxes. Cinders, you'll be doing the same on the other end of the vault using controlled explosives. But whatever you do, you have to keep it quiet, so no big booms. She protested, stomping her feet on the floor a few times, going back to her childish alter ego. No big booms. Only little, miniature booms. But you can blow up as much as you want afterwards. A couple $1 million will buy you a lot of explosives, trust me. Cinders smiled, looking off wistfully. What if someone hears something and comes in to investigate? I asked, playing devil's advocate. Mikey and I had gone over this before, so I knew he had a great plan. I just wanted to prove it to everyone else. That's the best part. There's going to be a fire alarm test happening at the same time, so nobody will be able to hear anything through the thick steel door. And if they do, our guy on the inside will be in charge of the cameras, so he'll just tell them everything looks fine and not to be worried. A fake camera loop will be playing the whole time, so if anyone asks to see, he can show them. And what if that doesn't convince them? Pete asked. What if they insist they want to see inside for themselves? Well, then we've got exactly 4 minutes to clear out. That's how long it takes to open the vault. And by then we'll be long gone and vanished into the maze of sewers beneath the casino. Everyone nodded, and Mikey continued telling us the plan, but it was all straightforward after that. We all figured it would be challenging, but manageable. What we didn't realize was that Mikey wasn't telling us the whole plan. I didn't even know what he was up to, as much as I thought I did. When the big day came, I was supposed to be sitting in front of the casino as the lookout man. But Mikey came down with a stomach bug and he looked pale as a ghost after throwing up all night. He was shaky and on the verge of passing out every time he stood up, but he insisted on going ahead with the operation. I did what any big brother would do. I volunteered to switch places with him. You stay in the van, okay, Mikey? I'm the only one who knows this plan as well as you do. And if you're gonna insist on going through with this today, then I'm gonna insist on you staying in the van and being the lookout. He reluctantly agreed, and that was how I ended up being the one down in the sewers, standing alongside Cinders and Pete. The three of us watched through our protective goggles as the ultra-bright white light burned a hole clean through the steel. Molten metal dripped down, bright red, burning a hole in the cement by our feet. I took a step back. Cinders looked at me and laughed, the liquid steel splashing just inches away from her toes, reflecting red in her welding goggles. Careful, Brian, she said, grinning. The floor is lava. After a hole had been burnt through the steel, Cinders sprayed the blackened edges with foam to cool them down for our entrance. Then Pete took the steel contraption I'd designed and threw it up through the hole, with just enough gentle spin so that it turned sideways at the peak of his toss. Then I hit the red button on the remote control, engaging the anchors. A steel rod shot out of either end of the cylinder, locking the device in place. I hit another button, and the rope ladder which was concealed inside popped out, unraveling until it reached the floor. Nice throw, Pete, I said, clapping our locksmith on the back. Hey, nice work yourself. That's one hell of a contraption. I might need to borrow it for my next job. Cinders began climbing up the ladder and I followed after her into the sound of the ringing fire alarm. So far the plan was going perfectly, and there was no sign of anyone having heard our entrance. After this, you might not need to do any more jobs, Pete. Once we got up into the vault, the three of us began to giggle softly, like children in a toy store. There was a stack of cash at the center of the vault far surpassing anything we could have imagined. There had to be tens of millions of dollars, if not more. Forget the lock boxes, Pete said over the alarms. This is more than we need. Let's take it and get the hell out of here. This is where things started getting weird. I agreed with Pete that the lockboxes weren't worth the trouble with a huge pile of cash sitting there, but Cinders didn't say anything. Instead, she went into a corner and started quietly pulling things out of her demolition bag. "What are you doing, Cinders? Help us load up the cash." She just ignored me, starting to set small explosives on a few of the lockbox doors. They were lined up on one wall, like safety deposit boxes in a bank vault. "Cinders, we don't need to risk the explosions. We've got more than enough right here." But she kept ignoring me. Instead, she just attached some cable to the small explosives on the lockbox doors and unwound the spool of it. Stepping away from them. "Let her work," Mikey said into my earpiece. "You get the money, let her do her thing." A small explosion went off a few seconds later and the room filled with a small, hazy cloud of white smoke. I shot a look over my shoulder, furrowing my brow. It didn't make sense. Why were they taking this unnecessary risk? Unless they knew something I didn't. I didn't have time to stay distracted, so I kept piling money into the bags we had brought, throwing them down into the sewers below. We were nearly half finished. "Shit, somebody heard that," Mikey said in my earpiece. "You guys need to get out of there. My guy can't stop them. They're coming in now." A noise came from the vault door, like a large steel plate being turned. "Damn it, Cinders." She was still ignoring me, pulling something out of one of the lockboxes. I filled one more bag and then told Pete to start heading down the ladder. We were leaving a lot of cash behind. I went over to Cinders and tapped her on the shoulder. "You just screwed up this whole heist. What the hell were you thinking? I told you to leave the lockboxes alone." Instead of turning around, she kept staring at the thing in her hand. A vial full of green liquid which she had extracted from the lockbox. I noticed a cut on Cinders' finger from where a piece of broken glass had pierced her skin. And then I saw the green liquid dripping from her hand. The vial had cracked in the explosion, and whatever was inside of it was now seeping into Cinders' bloodstream. "Cinders, are you okay? I think you should put that down. We don't know what that is." Much to my surprise, she actually listened to me. With her fingers shaking badly, she set the vial of diminishing green liquid back into the lockbox, and a little puddle began to form beneath it. "I know what it is, Brian. I've known all along. That's the whole reason I agreed to this heist. Someone paid me to extract that vial from this safe. The same person who paid your brother to set this all up. You really think he just happened to have a man on the inside, and you think he just coincidentally got sick today? No. He was scared. Scared of this shit. He didn't want to risk his life." This was all beginning to upset me. I could feel my blood boiling. "What the hell are you talking about, Cinders? My brother would never set me up." "Mikey, tell her." There was a deep sigh in my earpiece, as my brother hesitated. "I'm sorry, Brian. It wasn't supposed to break. The vial was supposed to be sturdy enough to survive a natural disaster. This was never supposed to happen." The vault door was unlocking and I realized we had wasted too much time. I began to hustle back towards the ladder, telling Cinders to leave the vial behind. When she turned around, I didn't like what I saw. Purple-black veins spread inwards from the periphery of her eyes. Her pupils were turning crimson as she opened her mouth and drool began to pour out from her lower lip. She growled, making a low sound in her throat like a dog. Her eyes were fixed on me as I backed away, but then the vault door opened and all hell broke loose. A few security guards drew their pistols as they entered, fanning out and moving towards the two of us. I had my foot on the ladder and was about to climb down when the closest one persuaded me to stop. "Freeze. Don't move," he yelled at me, his pistol pointed at my face. Without many other options, I raised my hands in submission. It looked as if our flawless plan had failed. The guard came over to me with handcuffs at the ready, but Cinders wasn't responding to the other guards as well as I was. "Hey," I said, "get your hands in the air, lady. I'm not gonna ask you again." Suddenly she raced towards one of the men, growling and drooling as she ran. They screamed at her to stop, but she seemed not to hear, instead lunging at him like a rabid dog as he squeezed the trigger. No. No. Ah. Get her off. He howled as his gun discharged into the air over and over, his shots wild and aimless. The bullets began to ricochet around the vault, one of them hitting the security guard closest to me. He dropped his gun, yelping in pain as he grabbed his shoulder. What the hell, Dan? He yelled, then saw what was happening and raced over to assist the other two guards. Cinders quickly turned her attention to them, raking her nails across one guard's face, scratching his eyes and blinding him in one rapid motion. Then she swept her other hand across his face from the other direction, alternating hands and scratching at his face over and over again in a frenzied attack. By the end of it, he was in a shuddering heap on the floor, bleeding out. The guard who had been closest to me was the only one of the three left, and he started firing his gun at her without any further warning. Bullets hit Cinders square in the chest, in the ribcage, in the neck, and in her shoulder. But she made no response. Instead, she leapt onto him like a tiger, her teeth sunk into his neck, ripping out his throat in one quick bite. He pushed and clawed at her face desperately, gurgling as blood bubbled up from the wound, his skin turning paler. That was about when I realized I hadn't been moving. I needed to get away or I would be next. I started climbing down the ladder, my eyes darting around the vault room as I went, taking a final look around at the chaos. Just before the room disappeared from my view, I saw one of the dead security guards' eyes snap open, purple-black veins spreading inwards from the edges of his eyes, towards his crimson-red pupils. With startling speed he rose to his feet and came running my way. I stumbled down the rope ladder 2 and 3 rungs at a time, too scared to move safely. My heart was pounding fast as my feet slipped and I slid down the rest of the way, landing badly on my ankle and rolling it. I cried out, looking up at the hole to see if anyone was coming. Instead of climbing down, the security guard fell down through the blasted hole in the vault floor, landing on the cement sewer floor with a hard crack, his leg breaking in half. A bone was jutting out through one side in a sharp splinter, but this didn't stop him. He got up and began to lurch and hop towards me, dragging his splintered femur and clawing desperately at the air just in front of me as I backed away. I got to my feet and started running, the adrenaline numbing the pain of my hurt ankle, but not entirely. Each step was agony as I raced to catch up with Pete, who was already 100 yards down the tunnel. Eventually he stopped and waited for me to catch up, sensing that I was injured. What the hell happened back there? Where's Cinders? He asked, looking wildly over my shoulder. Run! I screamed. Forget Cinders. She's dead. They're all dead. This only seemed to confuse him further, and he stayed where he was as I ran past him, grabbing his arm and telling him to keep moving. What are you talking about? She can't be dead. I just saw her. We can't just leave her in there. I didn't bother arguing with him any further, since just then Cinders appeared out of the darkness behind him, racing toward us with her red and purple eyes ablaze with hunger. Spittle clung to her face and dribbled down her chin, her teeth snapping like a rabid dog as she ran like an Olympic sprinter straight at us. Several infected guards were behind her, trailing slowly compared to her speed. They were injured from her attacks and from their fall down the ladder, but she was healthy and full of inhuman speed thanks to whatever was in that vial. It was making her fast and mean, homicidal. I couldn't help but stare in terrified fascination as she leapt onto Pete and dove face first into his neck with her teeth snapping ferociously, like a hungry stray dog after cornering a rabbit. There was no mercy or remorse, only terror and shrill screaming until the sounds of that cut off abruptly. Blood sprayed into the air and gushed from his wounds onto the concrete and down into the sewer water. I stood transfixed, watching as she tore him to pieces. Eventually I snapped out of it and ran, leaving the bags of money behind, no longer caring about them at all, only wanting to get away. Only wanting to run as far and as fast from that place as I could. The sound of footsteps behind me grew louder as the ladder came into focus in the distance. I tried not to look back over my shoulder, knowing that would only waste precious seconds. but I couldn't help it. I glanced back to see Cinders was in pursuit, trailing close behind me and gaining fast. I didn't stand a chance of making it to the ladder before she got to me. I realized that but continued to run, too terrified to give up. Duck. I heard someone scream from up ahead, and looked to see a dim light above the ladder where the manhole cover had been opened. Someone was standing in the sewers up ahead, aiming a gun in my direction. It was my little brother, Mikey. I kept running until I was close enough for him to get a proper shot off. Then I ducked out of the way, just as the explosion of his gun reverberated through the sewers. He shot Cinders again and again, each time hitting her square in the chest. And yet she kept coming. He shot her 3 more times, finally landing a shot on her right temple, stunning her. Cinders collapsed to the ground, a bleeding hole in the side of her head exposing her skull. I started running towards Mikey again, and a moment later she was up on her feet, moving marginally slower now. Let's go. Mikey screamed. Get up the ladder. Do you have it? Do you have the vial? I started climbing the ladder, shouting down at him. No, the vial broke. It's gone, just forget about it and let's get out of here. Continuing up the ladder, I thought he was following me. But when I got to the top I climbed out and looked down to see he was still in there, in the sewers, staring up at me. What are you doing, Mikey? We gotta go. Get up here. He let out a deep sigh, looking remorseful. You guys gotta go. Get far away from this city. No matter what you do, just run away and don't look back. They'll be coming for you, but they'll be coming for me first. And pretty soon we're all gonna have much bigger things to worry about. What are you talking about, Mikey? Get up here. Please. I realized I was crying as I looked down at him in the darkness, my tears dripping down to land at his feet. He looked straight ahead and began to fire his pistol again and again, letting out a howling war cry. But then an instant later an undead Cinders dove into him and brought him to the ground. Dave had to get out of the van and put the manhole cover back on, sealing the scene beneath the ground. I wasn't able to tear my eyes away from what I was seeing down there. My younger brother was getting ripped to pieces by a zombie. Who would have thought? Dave dragged me into the van and drove away from there. He seemed to know what was happening, as if Mikey had let him and Cinders in on the secret. I'll never forgive him for that for as long as I live. I don't think that will be very long, though. I don't think any of us have much time left. And I'm talking about humanity in general. A new virus is spreading in the sewers beneath Las Vegas. And it's only a matter of time before it surfaces again. And when it does, it won't matter how far we run. It'll be coming for us all.